Merry Christmas, you filthy animals. It's that time of year and we've decided to review all 6 Home Alone movies. That's right, 6 of them. But that means we do at least get to start with the original tale of Kevin McAllister and the Wet Bandits. Merry Christmas, everyone. Welcome to December on the Collector's Cut. We're a movie podcast. I am Peter, and I'm joined, as always, in his very festive Christmas jumper is David.
This is it. Don't get scared now.
Do you know what? There's so many quotes from this movie. I had no idea what you were. There's Kevin, you such a disease. The one that stuck out to me in this viewing was right at the start when the mum says, "If Uncle Frank says no, then it must be really bad."
Yeah.
But yeah, numerous quotes you could have picked. But anyway, it's Christmas season. Last year we did the Santa Claus trilogy. This year we are going with a heavy hitter. We're doing the Home Alone franchise. We're doing all 6 of these things. That's right. There's 6 of them. I am very, very familiar with the first 2. I have seen the third. I saw the third one in theaters because I was still young enough that I was excited about a third Home Alone. As a kid.
You poor naive thing.
I know. But I've never seen 4. I didn't even know 5 existed. And then the 6th one was the one that came out in Disney Plus like a year or 2 ago. So we got that as Home Sweet Home Alone's the last one. So we're going to do all 6. And to get them all out in time for Christmas, you're getting 2 of them a week. You're getting extra episodes. So Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.
I mean, I remember when we originally planned this, because we've had this in the can like planned out months now, and we were like, should we give them a gift? Should we do 2 per week? And we just looked at the scheduling and we're like, we could fit it. All right, here we go.
Well, we've had Home Alone sort of mapped on the schedule since probably before we did the Santa Claus. It was just like, that's next year's thing. And
we'll get there.
As we got like halfway through the year, we looked at it and went, it's kind of weird to get them all in before Christmas because it's too stupid to put one of them out after Christmas. We'd have to start them in like mid-November, and that just felt weird. And it was like, oh, let's just do it all quickly during December, get the whole thing done. Like, I can't think of any other Christmas franchises that are as big as this that would require this thought. Like, after this, they're all, at most there'll be 3 or 4, and it's a bit easier to just get them all in before Christmas and December. But for Home Alone, you get a treat. You get doubles for a few weeks. So yeah, you're welcome,
also,
everyone.
Just because you brought it up at the beginning, this will be the only time I show it off, but I do just want to stand up for the video audience. My Christmas sweater, as picked out specifically for this show, is piglets, kittens, and a Tyrannosaurus Rex, who is vomiting rainbows, are all flying around on pizza slices. And when you ask me, what does that have to do with Christmas? So anyway,
well, it's green and there's a lot of red and the other things. So
they're all wearing Santa hats.
Yeah,
that's it.
It looks Christmassy. It's a very Christmassy thing. I'm just sporting a Santa hat and a red jumper. I don't have any crazy Christmas sweaters.
I mean, I bought this specifically for this show, so...
So you say.
Yeah. No, it was gifted by my very dementia-ridden grandmother. We didn't have the heart to tell her.
So welcome to the show, everyone. We will do a little spoiler-free section. I suspect most of you know Home Alone quite well, but especially I think if you're between my and David's age, you grew up with this. I was born in '89, so Home Alone was just a staple of growing up around Christmas time. The first 2 movies in particular. And yeah, so I suspect we all know this quite well, but we'll start spoiler-free as well as do. The basic premise, of course, is that Kevin McAllister, played by Macaulay Culkin, is left home alone when his family go off to Paris for Christmas, and that would be fine. I mean, it wouldn't be a big deal, really. Like, okay, so he's just living off the crap in the fridge for a couple of days, whatever. Yeah. But there's 2 thieves who have got their eyes set on the big, expensive-looking house that they have, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, who are hilarious, and it's full of hijinks. They want to get in, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it all builds up to Kevin defending his home with a series of traps, because that's what people think of when they think of Home Alone. They think of the traps.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get to it, but that was kind of the big surprise for me going back to it, because I haven't seen this in probably over a decade now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was just how little of the movie is actually that. I mean, it's the third act, but I still remember that being the core focus of the movie, and honestly, it really isn't for a lot of it.
Look, it feels weird to compare like a kid family Christmas film to sex, but it's the orgasm, right? You build up for for 2 acts, and then you splooge with traps. That's
that's fair.
That's the movie.
I would rather you stop making that comparison, but
yeah, I'm done. We can move on. So yeah, let's do. I mean, there's actually like I think Home Alone. Obviously, it's a kids' Christmas film. If you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, it's at like 60%. So critically, it's only kind of mildly liked. But I think that's irrelevant for people our age. I think because we all grew up with this, it feels like the perfect Christmas movie to me. But you know,
yeah, it's one of those movies that it's solely driven by nostalgia. Like everything about it is just this was part of the childhood, and it's a good movie, don't get me wrong. I think there's real quality to it.
I think it holds up. I think there's a lot of little things that make it hold up beyond just the over the top antics that we'll talk about. But I think there's actually kind of a heart to it that I think people miss when they think about Home Alone as an idea. So yeah, it's good stuff. Obviously, I mean the cast, we got Macaulay Culkin as Kevin McAllister. He is the lead. He is the kid. He is, you know, he's not the best actor in the world at this age, but he's got a lot of facial expressions. He reacts well to things. He fills that void of, he thinks about the world differently. And when you're a kid, you relate to him, and as an adult, you're like, okay, I get why he's looking at this thing this way, and why this feels like a big task, even though it's not really. But
yeah,
you know,
it does a good job of. I mean, a lot of this movie is actually through his eyes, not just like what he's doing, but like how he sees things. And I think it does a really good job of getting that sort of childlike feeling for his sequences. And
the entire premise, of course, there's a lot of little contrivances to make it happen, and that's okay, because that's the whole concept of the movie is that this thing happens, and then we can have the movie play out. So we have to have all the contrivances.
That's the thing. You say it's contrivances, and to an extent it is, but I think that the first 20 minutes of this movie leading up to the point where he is left home alone are some of the most tightly written 20 minutes I have ever seen.
Well, I was thinking about the second movie, and obviously we'll talk about the second movie next episode, but I think I was thinking, you know, this is way more contrived than the second movie, and then I stopped myself and went, no, that's not true, because the second movie does have a big contrivance, but I think the second movie's setup to make it all happen is one huge contrivance, whereas this is a series of little contrivances that all build up to the thing happening.
That's fair.
So I like, yeah, we'll get into all that stuff. We got Joe Pesci as Harry, Daniel Stern as Marv, as I said, and they are like essential to the movie working. Like these two need to be entertaining. They need to be likable villains. You know, like obviously growing up with this movie, I saw Joe Pesci as Harry in Home Alone way before I saw him as, you know, the guy in Goodfellas or Casino. Or I mean, actually, I knew him as well from Lethal Weapon movies. Actually, I mean, not that I should have been watching them as a kid, but I was.
This is baby's first Joe Pesci, and to be fair, he still plays kind of the same character the whole way through. He's just a lot lighter on the cursing. I think,
and there's even a moment where he's kind of like getting around at the best. He sort of goes like freaking. He sort of does that, and I'm like, oh, you're just dropping F-bombs in your head, but you're just garbling it in your mouth to make it work.
What the fridge?
Daniel Stern's great as well. He obviously is not the bigger actor of the two, but he's actually very entertaining and is good. So you've got his parents, John Hurd and Catherine O'Hara. I think she's went on to have a bigger career, although John Hurd has popped up in things here or there. I've seen him in things.
Yeah, I think it's more so that Catherine O'Hara, because she does have a much larger part in this movie, she does feel like the bigger
she's the one that has the story with Kevin. She's the one that has the heartfelt story, so it makes sense that you remember her more. You've got Kevin's 4 actual siblings, and there's a moment in the middle of this movie where he takes out a photo of just his family, and I was so happy because I'm like, oh, this confirms which ones are actually, because 2 of them I was sure on, and I was actually right about the other 2, but it's hard to tell at the start because all of his cousins are around as well, and there's just kids all over the place.
It's even more confusing because one of the cousins is played by Kieran Culkin.
Yes.
So his actual brother is actually a cousin in the movie.
Yes. Which I guess makes sense in terms, because I'm like, okay, I was born a year before this came out. Like, he's only a few years older than me, really, and it makes sense that he's that age. But it's just, because I remember when I realized that it was his little brother who plays the cousin, and I was like, but he's like an adult in movies just now. Shouldn't he be older? And I'm like, nah, he's only a couple of years older than me. Really, he's like 5 in this, so he's like maybe 4 years older than me. If that. He was
born September 30th, 1982.
Oh, he's actually much older than I thought then.
Well, I think this movie, based off of the way they were talking about Kevin, I think this movie had a 2-year turnaround in post. I don't think it was immediately to 1990. So he was probably about 1980. So yeah, 5 years older than you, give or take.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because Kevin's meant to be 8 in the movie, which I'm sure he's slightly old. He
was 10 at the time of release.
Yeah, that's fair. So he was probably 8 when they were shooting the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very good. Yeah, I think the brothers and sisters, they've all got kind of their one thing. Buzz gets the most memorable stuff for the most part. I think there's the girl who talks to Buzz a lot, who's the main sister, I would say, because she has the most things to do. And then there's the other one who's basically remembered. The blonde is just remembered for one line of dialogue, which is, you're what the French call l'incompetente, I think was the line.
Yeah.
And then there's the ginger, who has nothing. He's just there, right? The only thing I can tell you about the ginger brother is that he puts a toothbrush in his pocket near the start of the movie. That's it. That's fair. That's all he has.
Yeah. That's about all he was doing. I'm looking through here, and it looks like he basically ducked out of the acting side of things, and he moves specifically into the camera and electrical department.
Yeah, he's still been working and stuff. I was looking up the main siblings here.
Yeah,
Buzz is still an actor, as is the blonde sister. The older sister, the brunette, she seemed to only do a couple of things around this time, and then basically that was it. She was done with the movies at that point for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, child actors, you got like a 50-50 shot whether you're going to keep going or not.
Yeah. Macaulay Culkin, I should say. I was getting mixed up with his brother Kieran there. McKieran. Macaulay Culkin. Obviously, he did a lot of other stuff as a kid. But like, honestly, these days I know him more for just guest appearing on various podcasts that he likes. He's shown up in Red Letter Media stuff. He showed up in OSW at one point, and I'm sure he's probably done some other ones that I don't watch. He's a big nerd by the sounds of it. He likes all this stuff, and just maybe he made enough money for the Home Alone. Home Alone 2.
I guarantee you, he's been making bank off royalties his entire life. He doesn't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, he's doing all right. The other the other kids, I should say, the cousins. Because one of the jokes at the start of the movie is that there's kids everywhere, and Joe Pesci, who's pretending to be a cop in the opening scene, keeps asking, like, so, are your parents here? Or are your parents home, is the exact line? And they say, yeah, okay, but they don't live here. So then he starts asking that, are your parents home? But do they live here? And it's like he's trying to get to Peter McAllister, who's the dad of Kevin, who actually owns the house, and he's trying to find them. But yeah, I think like the oldest kid, who's like a late teenager, who's like another curly haired brunette. I think it's her dad is Peter's brother, who is taking a job in France, which is why they're visiting them in France. But all of their kids, which is her and like I think some younger siblings, have either stayed with Kevin's family or maybe the other aunt and uncle's family. I presume to just keep going to school in the US because maybe it's like he's only working in France for a year or two. They don't want to upend the kids and move them back, kind of thing.
I mean, that's the thing. The entire reason as to why they're going to France is to some extent explained, but for the most part, it's just, hey, let's get them out of the country far enough so that when the mom has to make the way back, we can have a whole plot there.
Yeah. It's one of the little convoluted things. It's one of those little contrivances we were talking about. It's just like the whole reason. Because I think as a kid, I just never understood the actual dynamics of the family. Now that I'm older and I'm actually looking to like pay attention to the puzzle of how they all fit together.
But see, that's exactly what I was saying, though, is that this was, I believe, written by John Hughes, correct?
Yes. I think so. That's correct, yeah.
So written by John Hughes. It is so tight. Like right up until the point where everyone leaves and everything's gone, and even at the point where they're leaving, all of the reasons that could possibly be like, now, wait a minute, shouldn't they have realized at this point? Covered. All of them. Yeah. And it's so tightly written the whole way through.
It's good fun, and we're still just going through family members. We've got the other aunt and uncle. Uncle Frank, who is very memorable because well, he says, "Look what you did, you little jerk," and he's kind of, but he's got one characteristic that keeps coming up, and that is a cheap piece of shit, right?
Yep.
He doesn't want to pay for the pizza at the start. He's like, "Oh, the champagne's free in first class, isn't it?" And then he's asking, "It's like, hey, honey, put these crystals in your bag from the plane. Steal them, put them in your bag." He's the cheap part of the family, and that's his whole thing. I basically just concluded every moment he has.
His final moment is as they are realizing they forgot Kevin. He's like, if it's any consolation, I forgot my reading glasses.
And everyone just looks at him like he's a piece of shit.
Yep.
Yeah, nah. So Frank's great. His wife just seems like a normal person who puts up with how much of her deranged husband she has.
Yep.
And that's most of the family. I guess the other big characters but not mentioned is the scary neighbor, Marley, who ends up being a big part of the film. And John Candy pops up as the King of Polka.
Yep.
Polka blues, the spinner polka. I can't remember what he says.
I specifically remember, it's just a strange childhood memory from probably like 10 years, 20 years ago, is that my grandfather had a polka like cassette tape he would play in the car whenever I was in the car with him. So I am aware of polka. But to see how proud this guy is of his polka achievements, I'm like, all right, let's take a step back there, buddy.
Yeah. And then, do you know what? Not this viewing, right? Because it's a bit gone. But I remember watching this in about, I don't know, 2010, 2011, somewhere around then. And I remember laughing out loud because there's a scene when the mum's like already back in the US and she's trying to get to, Chicago, which is where they're from.
Yep.
And she's like, "Oh, I got a flight to Dallas, and then I got a flight to here. Where am I again?" And she's like, "Scranton." And I just remember in about 2010 laughing out loud because the only place I knew Scranton from was The Office.
Yeah.
And just being like, "Oh shit, Scranton's been in my life since I watched Home Alone as a child. Oh wow." The
moment they said Scranton, I just was immediately like, "Well, I can see why this managed to stick out now."
Yeah. Honestly, I hear Scranton, and all I can hear in my head is, I can't even sing it, but the theme song. The theme song from The Office. Yeah. So, yes. That's the cast. And we have to talk about the music. John Williams,
of course,
basically scored Christmas, right? He'd done Superman, Star Wars, all these other things. So he scored Christmas. And I don't know if there's any piece of music that makes me go, "Oh, this feels like Christmas," more than the main little theme from Home Alone.
So there's a point, like obviously it's played as the main theme as an instrumental throughout the movie, but there's a point where they actually apply like lyrics to it as if it's being sung by a choir.
Yeah, it's somewhere in my memory is the lyrics to say.
I as soon as the lyrics were coming up to it, I was immediately second guessing myself because it just seemed so just purified Christmas cheer in musical form. And I'm like, there's no way that he wrote this. There's no way that he just made this.
No, he did. Because you got the main theme, which is the sort of the na da 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 da, right? But you've also got like the hijinks. There's like the dun 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 dun, right? Right, John Williams, like, he's not my favorite composer, but obviously he's iconic, and I think one of the reasons why he's iconic is because so much of his music's very easy to just hum. You can just do it.
Oh yeah,
you can just go for it, and it works.
It balances the perfect thing of memorability and also the emotion that you're supposed to be feeling there.
Yeah, the other one that always sticks out when I watch it is, which isn't as hummable, admittedly, is the it's like the brass that plays. It's like the saxophone or something like that when it's the two villains are like casing the houses out.
Oh yeah,
and it's like their little theme that plays. It's very good. It's a full range of themes that are in the movie that all kind of come up. So yeah, all that stuff's great. So the music's absolutely fantastic. And of course the fact that the McAllisters have this big house, which I think when I was a kid I just assumed, oh, this is the sort of house I'll have when I grow up because this is what families have. And no, this man is rich. He is filthy rich. If anything, the biggest plot hole in the whole movie is that someone with a house this big doesn't have an alarm.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they supposedly live in a very, very nice neighborhood, so maybe they thought they never need it. There's one point in this movie that, like, okay, I live in modern America. I am middle class, if maybe slightly upper. I recognize that I will never have that home. I recognize I will likely never have any home. But the part that pissed me off the most of going back to this nostalgia is there's a part where Kevin goes out for groceries and he's got a full cart.
It's like 1982 is the price,
1982. And he's got toys. He's got like laundry detergent. He is not skimping here.
Yeah,
and it costs him under $20.
I was looking at what he had in his... Because you see where he gets his money. He steals money out of Buzzy's like little savings that he's got in his room. And I didn't ever actually like pause it to see how much it was. But I was like, oh, that's maybe $20, $30 in there at most. Like, that's all he's probably got. And I was looking at this shopping trolley and going... There's no way he's got enough to cover all this. This looks like at least triple of what the price she said. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe in 1989, 1990, when this was made, maybe that actually was the price of this stuff. And I just have to accept that I've never known prices this cheap.
It's one of those things where, you know, Christmas nostalgia, you're like, oh yeah, it's about the heart and stuff like that. But then every once in a while, they'll throw out a price and you're like, you sons of bitches don't know how good you have it.
There's a whole bit where, which by the way, I've like this is like one of the only times I think I've heard a character use a wrestling term, which makes me think it wasn't a wrestling term to begin with, but it's become a wrestling term. Is when the mum says, "Do you feel like a heel for us being in first class while the kids are in coach?" And I was like, did people used to use that on an unwrestling way? Because I guess they did.
Heel just used to be villain in general.
But on price, I bet you those first class tickets that they paid for are probably similar, if not cheaper, than what the coach price is today.
Oh, no doubt.
That's my that's my depressing like moment of like I bet this is true.
It's also all the like pre 9/11 stuff where it's like, oh yeah, don't worry, lady, you can just hang out in this terminal for as long as you want. We'll just give you a call. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You can just sit around there.
I almost believe that probably was possible. The part that struck me as a bit weirder is when they're running for the gate and the woman at the terminal is like, just pick an empty seat. I'm like, what? No, no, never.
The first class ones, they have specific assigned seats, but the kids in coach, just scramble them about. We don't need to pay attention.
I guess you read it because they're running in last minute. It's like, okay, the only seats left are the ones that are for you anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you're in the correct seats. Just, you know. Right. Because the kids technically will all be assigned to a specific seat. Or at least they would be now. I don't know if it was the case in, 88 when they shot this.
Yeah, nowadays it's specific seats for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, all that stuff is just the time period stuff that sticks out. There's a line towards the end where he's like, what if he calls the cop? And he's like, from a treehouse? And I'm like, today, like, you wouldn't even second guess that line. Like, you would just whip out your smartphone and call from a treehouse.
There was a YouTube sketch video. I can't remember who put it out, but it was basically what movies would be ruined if they existed after smartphones, after cell phones even. And Home Alone was the very first one where he's like, I'm home alone. And then he just pulls his phone out of his pocket. And mom's like, go to your neighbor's house.
Yeah, to be fair, that's one of the things they kept. So I'll just say spoiler warning now, because we're just going to start talking about everything. One of the things they set up at the start, though, is that every family in this neighborhood has went away for Christmas, which... For me, Christmas is such an at-home time. It's kind of weird to me that all these like the entire streets left for Christmas. But sure, it works for the plot of the movie. It's one of those little contrivances, but it explains why there's no one around that they can trust to go and look in on them, look after them.
Except for the snow shovel slayer.
We'll get to him later. But all these things at the start where it's like, okay, why they don't have the extra ticket for like to say, hey, someone's not used a ticket, is because when they spill the milk in the kitchen over all the passports and tickets, the dad accidentally throws out the one ticket, Kevin's ticket, presumably, and that's like, oh, there you go. And obviously there's that annoying kid from across the street who's around who accidentally gets head counted for why they get why the sister or the cousin gets the right count of heads. So it's like, okay.
My favorite thing for the tight rating here is they put Kevin upstairs in like the upper thing.
That's the attic, basically,
Yeah, in the attic. And they even say like, oh, there should be another kid, Kieran actually, who's going to be sleeping in the same bed as him. But he convinces his mom to let him sleep alone up there.
Is because this kid's notorious for wetting the bed. And one of my favorite moments in the first 15 minutes of this movie is when they're all having the pizza and Kevin looks over at his little cousin and he's sitting with a can of Pepsi and he just looks at him with his eyebrows up like, hey baby, like I'm going to be pissing all night. And I'm like, they're giving me the impression that this kid's going to be into water sports when he's older, because the way he looks excited about pissing on his cousin is just too much. But I love it.
But the best part for me is that there is a storm that night that knocks out the power,
and
therefore, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It knocks out the power, so none of their alarms go off. And that's fine enough on its own. That's a little contrivance, but it's fine. But the fact that they managed to spin that into, okay, the power's back, but the phone lines are still down. And that then allows for later points in the movie to all happen as well. It's one singular event that manages to get all of these things coming out.
If they could just phone the house, like, it would change the movie so much. I mean, it wouldn't ruin it, because you could say, okay, she's still trying to get back, and she's at least talked to him to say, I'm on my way back. You could still have the whole plot with the burglars and all the rest of it, but it would take away from the whole, because part of the heart of this movie is that Kevin wishes his family wasn't there, and then they're gone, and the arc of the film is him realizing, no, he does want his family, he loves them, and he's lonely without them, all that stuff. And if you don't have the constant absence until the very end, that would ruin that a little bit. But all this stuff at the start, like the phones being out is a big deal, the power going out, which, if not only just for everything else that comes after, but the initial thing that does is that they are in such a rush at the start of the day that it's like, okay, this is just another thing to let you believe that she might forget that the other son's up in the attic, right? And she's just trusted that the big cousin has made the head count and the numbers are right, but she's not seen them. And even the fact that they're going to the airport in 2 vehicles, because there's always that reasonable doubt in her head, he's in the other car, he's in the other van. Just there's enough, just enough just to suspend your disbelief, just enough to believe it could happen.
And even what we were saying before with, like, oh, they have to pick up random seats in coach. No 2 kids are going to be sitting, like, because there's no assigned seats. Yeah. There's no empty seat where Kevin should be.
Yeah. Yeah, so we get the great realization and all that. But the characterization at the start for Kevin's is very important, right? It sets up a character, which is, again, understandable. He's 8, right? But one of the big things to set up, other than just his general immaturity, is that he is scared of packing a bag. Like, when he's told to go pack his bag, he's like, but I'm 8. Like, I can't pack a bag. What do you put in a bag? And he's asking all his siblings, like, what does he do? And they're all just like, piss off. They don't want anything to do with him. So it sets up this kid who can't do anything for himself. And that's like, actually, that is the Ginger brothers' only contribution, along with the other sister, is they say that, like, face it, Mum's going to do it for you because they do everything for you. And I suppose, had they woken up on time, that would have been something the mum would do last minute, like, for him, before they left. But obviously they're in a rush, so all that goes out the window. But that characteristic, obviously the big thing is him wishing he didn't have a family because he gets mad at them all for, and even as an adult, I kind of sympathize with Kevin at the start of the movie, and that's part of the charm of it. But the idea of this many people round about my house is like anxiety.
I straight up, I know that they're supposed to be like, oh yeah, it's Christmas time, we're all family and whatnot, but like, if I had to spend 10 seconds at that dinner scene, I would blow my brains out. That is like my definition of hell, is that.
Oh, absolutely. And it was very relatable as a kid as well, because the idea of wanting a plain cheese pizza was something that I definitely would have wanted up until the age of maybe 10. I don't know when I said, no, you know what, I actually want a bunch of meat on my pizza. That sounds way better. But there was definitely a time when I was that young where I would have wanted a plain cheese pizza.
I mean, to be fair, I still go for plain cheese, but I will eat whatever. I don't have a problem. But there was an age where all I would eat was plain cheese, and it probably was around Kevin's age, where it's like, this, guys, I'm not going to have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I've given up pizza. I've not eaten pizza in like 4 years now.
I haven't eaten pizza in at least 4 hours. So
not because I don't love it. I miss it all the time. It's just like, I would eat a whole pizza. It was more about just trying to cut down on fat, and it's just a blanket thing. Cold turkey, no pizza was a rule.
I got you.
So,
I got you.
I mean, I miss it. I miss it so dearly. But
I'll describe it to you whenever you want, because I still have it about twice a week.
No, you shut up. You shut your filthy mouth. I don't want to hear it. So, yeah. So they do all this up with his character that he can't do anything for himself, and that's one of the things you see throughout the film is that he goes shopping, he gets supplies, he puts up Christmas decorations, he maintains the house a little bit. Obviously not right away. Right away he does all the dumb shit a kid would do when they realize they've got free reign.
See, that's actually one of my favorite little transitions in this movie, is that he goes through that whole long section of just eating junk food, watching movies he's not supposed to.
The mountain of ice cream that he's eating at one point, yeah.
He's just slurping it all down. And then there's a transition point where he realizes, like, okay, if my family is actually gone, I need to be able to do these things. And so he realizes, like, I gotta go shopping. And so at that point, you see this transition over. And I think the biggest transition marker is that through his childlike eyes, we see the furnace downstairs.
And he's scared of it, yeah.
He's terrified of it. It makes all these loud noises. He runs out of the basement. But then as he's forced to do laundry down there one day, it starts making noise. We see him get scared of it. And he's like, shut up. And then it's just done. And that's just him growing up. That's him learning how to do these things.
I like as well that it doesn't even happen. It's not like he just suddenly turns into feeling I need to be responsible. He does it in this kind of I'm going to make believe that I'm grown up. You know, there's that whole scene where he's describing all the products he's used to wash himself with, because he's like, oh, this is grown up. I'm using cologne and I'm using this type of hair gel, and I'm like, he's going through the whole thing, and it's this idea of pretending to be more grown up. But I think what I love about, especially watching this through adult eyes, and why I think this still works really well, is this transition of, oh, I'm just going to mess around and eat junk food and not do anything, and everything's going to be a mess. And then it turns, and then he starts. Yeah, I mean, you don't see him cleaning, but he clearly does, because the house isn't a wreck in the second half of the movie, along with him going to buy supplies and stuff. Is that even as an adult, even if you like make it okay for you to be lazy for a couple of days because you want to take some time off, and you arrange for like 2 or 3 days where you say, no, this is my time off, I'm just having a staycation, if that's the trendy term for it. Almost everyone, after about 1 day, even if you know that you don't have to feel guilty because you have allotted this time to relax, after a day, you start to hear it in your head, I should probably do something. I should do at least one chore. I should do a lot. And as someone who works from home, who does like creative stuff, like after a day of doing nothing, I'm like, I should probably do a little bit of editing. I should do a little bit of work. And that is so, that even at 8 years old, it still kicks in for Kevin, where he's like, I should probably start to maintain the place a bit and go get stuff.
Which, I mean, it's very relatable as an adult, but I kind of feel bad for him as a kid, of him being shoved into that sort of situation, you know? Because no kid should have to sit there and be like, oh, geez, we're out of eggs. All right, I'll go to the store. Like,
that's what's so beautiful. But as much as you say a kid shouldn't do that, they do point out at the start that he's especially, like, coddled. And he kind of, like, Buzz even says it, and as much as Buzz has been a shitty big brother when he says it to his sister, he's like, no, he could use a few days in the real world. The truth is, he's kind of right. It actually does make a man out of him in a weird way.
Yeah, for sure. That being said, I mean, we'll get to it by the time we hit the end of the movie, but he, as John Candy says at a certain point, is going to need months of therapy after all this has happened.
Well, no. John Candy's telling a story of leaving a kid trapped with a dead body in a morgue. That's very different to just being home alone.
I get that, but I feel like any kid in a situation where his house was broken into as it was and being left alone is going to have A, abandonment issues, and B, afraid to open the door.
No. In the real world, you're absolutely right. In this movie, he's basically this is the origin story of a superhero, okay?
Yeah, no doubt. This is John McClane's like protege.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's Kid Die Hard. That's basically what it is. That's what you could market it as. It's wonderful. So I think, you know, so he wakes up, you know, and they do this great transition where they get on the plane and she's like, oh, I hope we haven't forgotten anything. Cut to Kevin open the door with the bed head and looking around like, guys? Mom? Right? And then I love, this is a great little detail. He runs out and sees the cars and goes, well, they couldn't have went to the airport because the cars are here. And it makes sense that he just wouldn't know. Oh, they've hired a service to come and pick them up. Like, it makes sense he wouldn't know that. Yeah. So it also ties into the dad thinking, you know, later on, like, oh, I didn't shut the garage doors. That's what we forgot. And then one of my, and partly it's just because I've been watching this since I was like 4, right? But there's just a lot of moments in this that feel iconic to me. And the mum yelling Kevin as she sits up and realizes she's left her kid is one of those moments. It's the
for sure, yeah. Well, that's it's part of a dual moment, and honestly, it's separated by like a minute or two, so it almost doesn't feel like it. But that's the moment where Kevin is screaming out like "Mom!" and then it cuts to the plane. We see her realizing it. She shouts out Kevin as well.
But of course,
so it's both them realizing it.
But of course, the arc of the movie is that at first Kevin's quite happy about this. In fact, he's like, "I'm home alone," and he looks straight at the camera and wiggles his eyebrows like, "Oh yeah, baby!" Like it's Kevin's time.
The line is like sad and solemnly. He's like, "I made my family disappear," and then we get a full 30 seconds of just flashbacks to them just being the worst to him.
Yeah.
And then he looks at the camera. He's like, "I made my family disappear."
Yeah, it's very good. It's very entertaining, and like you say, he's watching the old gangster movie, which is not a real movie. It's just something they shot for this. But
it was, what was it, Angels with Dirty Souls or something like that.
I thought it was Dirty Faces, but you maybe Soul sounds actually more.
I don't know. It's one or the other.
Sounds more reasonable, yeah. And he orders pizza, you know, and it's the guy who delivers. It's the same guy at the start of the movie who was delighted by his tip. And I actually love that the mum was like, "Wait, $120 for pizza?" And he's like, "Well, it's 10 pizzas. I mean, actually, that's reasonable. Reasonable. If anything, you can only get like 4 pizzas for that these days."
Oh God!
I know. Things have changed so much.
Eventually on this show, I know we will get either on this show or on the Ace. We're going to get to Back to the Future, and I have words about the gas prices when they come up. I have many words.
When the Resident Evil 2 remake came out a few years ago, because the original game came out in '98, so even the remake's still set in '98, and the game starts at a petrol station, and the price is up there, and it's like an authentic price from that time period, and I remember all the streamers like mentioning that. Wait a minute! I wish I could get gas at that price these days.
Ugh,
I wish.
It's awful.
So
I do love. There's lots of stuff in this movie that is like, when it's him going up against the wet bandits, when it's him going up against the burglars, it makes sense that he has all these kooky contraptions and stuff like that to basically keep them out of the house. And he keeps doing this for other things as well. Like you said, the pizza guy, at one point he comes up and he uses this movie to like fake a conversation so that he so an adult is home. And it's not immediately apparent, at least I didn't think so, that the whole reason he's doing so is because he doesn't want people questioning that he is home alone. Like, he knows that he's not supposed to be a kid living on his own.
And the funny thing is that this is the one where you get why he thinks he has to do it here, because he's a kid. But in actuality, I don't think a delivery driver would think it's that weird that a kid answers the door and pays for it. Like, that's not that weird. At all. Yeah.
If anything, the weirder part of it is when he goes out to buy stuff at the grocery store, the woman at the checkout is really inquisitive.
Yeah, she's
like,
grilling
"Where's your
him.
mom? Where's your dad? Where do you live?"
And I'm like, come on, it's a supermarket. It's not that weird. like I get that it's, you know, Kevin's acting like he's an adult because he's like, "Oh, for the kids," and he's like reading. He's like, "Here's a coupon I got this morning," and the thing.
Right.
I think. Yeah, the pizza guy stuff's funny. Him being mad at the tip shit at the start, but hey, Kevin's only got like Buzzy's money. He's not got a lot to mess with here. He's got to feed himself. But I think that, and then also even just when he's like using the BB gun with the little like toys, and he sets up like the chute that goes down to it's the laundry chute, and he props up the little door with the spatula, and he's got the little toys, and he's firing the BB gun. It's just little things like that are setting up that he's got some ingenuity. He does, like, you know, in a way that, and I think that's why the premise of the film works really well, is that maybe most kids aren't as smart as Kevin is, but most kids do use things for stuff that they're not intended for. Kids have imaginations. They build forts out of things that aren't meant to be walls. they build, you know, whatever. It's a very kid-like mentality. So all these little things that he does, or even in the middle of the movie, once he realizes there's a threat to come from these wet bandits, and he does the whole fake party because he wants to try and trick them to think that there's other people there. And he's got the Michael Jordan stand up on the toy train. He's got a mannequin on the record player spinning around. If anything, my big question here is, like, okay, you've got like 3 mannequins here. That's maybe a bit too many, he believes, in a normal house, but I'll go with it. That's however his dad got rich. Whatever his job is, it involves mannequins. I was thinking maybe the mum's job is to like design outfits or something, and that's why they've got. They never explain it. Whatever. I'll just go with it. It's fine. I'll roll. Yeah. No. The only other thing that I think is really big for that scene is that it doesn't really have a lot of lead in, if it makes any sense. Like, up to this point, yes, he does have little things of, like you said, messing around with the BB gun and all that, but this is
first time that we see him do like a large scale operation in order to scare off these wet bandits. And it, admittedly, it is just like a bunch of ropes and stuff, but he came up with it just within, it seems, 30 minutes or so, and he's just got this all set up. So it doesn't do a great job, I think, of like giving us a lead in to showing that Kevin is this sort of ingenuity, that he is this kind of smart. But once we get to it, I mean, I accept it. I feel like
I think that the point is here you don't see him doing it. This is revealing that he's this smart, and then later you see the montage of him setting up all the traps, and okay, at this point you've established that he can do this kind of thing, that he thinks outside the box. The build up to the Wet Bandits, though, where you meet, obviously you get Joe Pesci at the start, pretend to be the cop, and he's basically just going around finding out when everyone's leaving, so he knows when to rob them. But they're in the other house, and actually the first time is they actually try to go to Kevin's house, and all he does is turn on the light, and that scares them away. It's like, oh shit, there's someone here.
It also does a really great job of basically saying that Kevin's house is the richest house on the block, like by far. So that's the one that even if they're able to rob from everyone else, it's not even worth as much as going to Kevin's house and getting everything. Yeah,
they want his house. One of the things actually on the pizza guy scene that I'm thinking about, just because it comes up again later with Marv when he's at the door and he uses the same movie, is I was thinking one of the more unbelievable things in the movie is that the pizza guy would even mistake the gunshots from a movie to be real gunshots, because he gets scared and runs away. And this doesn't make it convincing, but there's a detail here that I noticed that I do kind of like. It's at least them trying to explain it, is that when he first goes into the kitchen earlier on in the movie and he turns on the little TV there, which, by the way, was a relatively common thing to have a little portable TV in your kitchen. These days, you can just bring your tablet in and watch something, so no one needs an extra TV.
Yeah, it's such a weird little window of time where the tech was small and cheap enough that you could just put a TV wherever, but then nowadays, because everyone has smartphones, they're gone again.
Yeah, you don't need to do it now. We've got other more reasonable options, but this was definitely a thing. I remember, at least for a period, one of my kitchens having a TV in it when I was young. But
my parents had one that folded down from underneath the cabinet for like probably 6 months before someone broke it and no one fessed up.
and I get it, because I like listening to or watching stuff when I'm doing chores, when I'm cooking or not I cook, but like, or when I'm washing dishes. Like, you know, I like to listen to stuff, so it makes sense. But now it's just there's other options. But so it's on its own, so the TV's already there. But one of the things that in the scene with Marv I noticed is that Kevin's actually brought in the stereo speakers and hooked them up to the TV. There are these big speakers next to them, so they're at least selling the idea that he's boosting the volume with these big speakers. I still don't believe it would sound real, but at least it's like, okay, he is boosting. They're at least giving me some kind of thought process to it.
It's one of those things where as soon as you start to really poke and prod at it, the whole thing falls apart. So you just kind of accept of, no, if you hear people talking, it's going to sound lifelike, even if it's from a TV.
Yeah. It takes a lot to make it convincing, like it is a real sound. And it's why even, like, some dogs can be tricked, but most cats and dogs are actually really good at understanding the difference between a real noise and the fake noise from the TV and stuff, because their hearing's quite good. And sometimes I'll think I'm watching something with lots of gunshots and explosions, and they won't even bat an eye. But if someone just clanks a gate outside the house, their heads will go up and they can tell it's a real sound.
See, I agree, except that my house has an electronic doorbell, and my cats freak out from that. And because it's electronic, it sounds the same as if it's on the TV. So anytime there's a doorbell on TV, my cats scramble because they think someone's about to enter the home.
Yeah, but at least that's still a sign of intelligence, because that's like, they've been trained to say that that's what that means. So that's actually not like a bad thing, but I get it. Anyway, Wet Bandits. So first time the light tricks them away. We see them robbing somewhere else, and they establish that Marv likes to leave the taps running because it's their calling card. It's the Wet Bandits. All the greats have a calling card, and Harry's like, I told you not to do that. It's a stupid thing. And at the end of the movie, we find out why it's stupid, because it's a calling card, so if the police catch you for any of these crimes, they know what all of your crimes are. This is genius.
It's great because I didn't actually think of that. Like, I was thinking like, oh yeah, no, clearly by the end of the movie, just by genre tropes, you know that Marv and Harry are going to get caught. It's obvious, but you don't think about the fact of, oh, and they'll have evidence that they did all of it because of these taps.
One of the greatest, like, oh, that's why this is a thing moments I've ever had in a movie. And this is not a big thing from an adult's perspective, but as a kid I never understood this, and it's when I watched the movie as a teenager or maybe a young adult, depending on when I watched it around that time, is that I finally realized that the reason why when Kevin runs through a basement at the end of the movie and it's all like flooded with water, that it's because this is one of the houses they've already robbed from, and they, you know, Marv left the taps on, and that's why the basement's flooded. That's something that clicked for me, you know, when I watched it later on. Like, when I was a kid I never got that, and I was like, oh man, like, that's actually a really good detail. That's a really neat detail. Like,
as a kid you don't even understand it because you don't expect the fact that we are going to be going back to one of these other houses that they already hit. So you just kind of were just like, okay, I guess this person has a swimming pool in their basement.
Yeah, I love that detail. It's not even that big a deal, but it felt like a big deal when I realized that. I'm like, oh shit, all this time that's what's going on here.
Honestly, I know I've said it like 3 times now, but I think this movie is kind of a masterclass in Chekhov's guns.
Those details, there's a lot of details.
Where they take something, they show it to you, and it seems like it's already kind of paid off. It seems like it's something where they could have just left it at that and never mentioned again, and it would have been fine. But it always ends up coming back in some major way that helps further the plot at that later point. If anything, the tap situation is pretty much the least impactful one because yes, the basement is flooded, but it doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah, the big thing, once obviously they realize on the plane and like they're very distressed, especially Kate, the mum, very distressed about getting back to Kevin and all that. And as soon as they get to the airport, they're like grabbing this French woman off the phone and like, get away here, you bitch! I need to phone my son. And
if I ever ran into a family like the McAllisters, I would hate them. They are the worst.
Yes, they're very American.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But they phone the police, and like, first of all, this is just one of these scenes that since I was a kid, it always makes me want a donut, because that one cop is eating this great looking chocolate covered donut, and I always want it, and I always forget and then notice in the scene that a part of the donut falls on the phone and stays there for a good little bit before it falls off. Love it. But again, this is a lot of them going out of their way to explain why the movie can keep going, because okay, we'll send a policeman to go check your house, but this is right after Kevin's had his first encounter and gotten scared from the wet bandits, so he stays under the bed and doesn't answer the door. So the cop's just like, there's no answer, whatever. This is a goose hunt anyway, whatever. Off it goes. So it's like, okay, we're setting up why, like, because I mean, I'm not even sure what would happen in this situation if the police did just like, speak to Kevin. Did they just make sure he's okay and leave him there? Did they take him somewhere else? I
would imagine, based off the situation and how much the police seem to care, it would have just been a, hey, are your parents home? No. Or yes, depending on if he wants to lie. And just checking and being like, well, we got a call from your mom.
Yeah.
She's going to be home soonish. Have a nice day. And really, that's one of the major things of this movie, is not only making it so Kevin is faking that he is actually with people the whole time, but it's also making sure that no one is able to tell him that his parents aren't actually disappeared.
Yes. Because he still believes right up until they come back at the end that they're gone. And that's one of the sweet things, is he finds that Santa and asks him for Christmas, hey, I want... And it's this thing where he's like, okay, I'm grown up, I know how it works, you're not the real Santa, but you work for the real Santa. Yeah. So it's like, okay, he's matured, but he still thinks Santa's real. And it's just this nice little thing where it's like, oh, he's still a kid, right? Yeah. All the growth aside, he's still a kid. And that
And works. Even that scene works double duty, because if you continue forward and think, assuming kids are going to watch this movie, it explains why on Christmas morning there are no presents under the tree. It explains where he says, Santa doesn't have to bring me any presents as long as he brings my family.
Which I love. He lists all the family, and he doesn't say Frank until the very end. He's like, and if he's got time, Uncle Frank.
I guess. He can exist in the limbo between worlds if we really have to.
That's good stuff. So... yeah, he does all this stuff. He goes for groceries, which is nothing thing. There's the scene where he gets scared by the neighbor. We should probably talk about him now, actually.
So, for sure.
So early on in the film, when the brother and that's still there, the brother's just trying to scare his cousin. But he's like, hey, this neighbor we've got, this shoveler who's across the street, he's a serial killer. He killed a bunch of people on this street, 20 years ago or whatever, but not enough evidence. So the whole movie, this has scared the shit out of Kevin. So every time he sees him, he is terrified by this man. And when he's at the store trying to buy this toothbrush, and he's being like such a Karen to the woman who works there, he's like, is this toothbrush authorized by the Dental Association of America? I don't know. Could you please check for me? With what? There's no internet, Kevin.
I love how she eventually brings in another guy, and you can just hear them bickering as he gets scared by the neighbor. And the one guy just says, why don't you just tell him it is? Who cares?
Just say yes. He's a kid.
Just say yes. He said, like, why are you bothering me with this?
Yeah. And he gets scared and runs away, and then he's like, oh, I'm a criminal. So he has this guilt now because he's stolen a toothbrush because he was scared. One of my details I actually noticed this time, and this might not even be an intentional thing, but I really liked it when I realized this. So all throughout the movie, it's particularly in this scene at the store where he's getting the toothbrush, is, you know, it really emphasizes the old man's hand. You know, he puts his hand on the counter and he's got a bandage over a cut. Or, you know, who knows what he did to his hand? Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But he's got a cut and he's got a bandage. So it kind of it makes him scarier because there's blood, and it's like, oh, did he get that cut being a murderer kind of thing in Kevin's brain? So he's got this bandage, right? And he actually, if you really pay attention, you can see that he's buying plasters, or Band-Aids for the Americans, right? He's literally there to address this thing in his hand. So he sees him again and he's scared of him. And later on in the movie, when Kevin goes to the church before the third act kicks off, right? He gets and he meets the man and he's sweet to him, and it ends up being this good conversation about what family means to both of them. And this old man's got regrets, but they bond, and Kevin realizes he's not actually scary. In this scene, he no longer has the bandage, he has the plaster over the cut. So it's like, oh, he's not as scary anymore. So it's kind of set up this idea that a bandage over the hand is a representation of someone that Kevin should be scared of, or is scared of. Neat little thing is that right during the third act, when they're about to climb the rope to come and get Kevin in the treehouse, Joe Pesci puts a white wrap around his hand because his hand got burned. So it's like it's transitioned, like, okay, now he's the real villain because he's the one with the bandage around his hand. I just thought that was a neat little...
Yeah, I'm not sure if that'd be intentional, but it does make sense.
I don't know. But this is the thing. You see, this is a sort of movie you've seen 100 times at this point. You start to notice things and little motifs, and I don't know if that one's intentional. It could just be happenstance. But either way, I like it. It worked.
That's, as long as we're talking about this sort of stuff, of motifs, one thing that I noticed from the beginning of the movie straight to the end is that as Kevin grows, the camera kind of moves more to his level. So in the beginning of the movie, he's always like very much towards the bottom of the frame. It's always looking down on him. He's more of like a child. But then by the time the end of the movie hits, whenever it cuts to him, it's pretty much in level with his eyes. He's on the same level as any other character.
That's a very good subtle thing, actually. It's the idea that we're looking down at him, but then at the end, he's kind of more on our level. So even though we're physically going down, it's more like he's rising up to our level thematically. Yeah, that's a nice touch. Chris Columbus, who directed this, you know, he went on to do the first 2 Harry Potter movies, funnily enough. So he, which is, it's so weird that the time between this and Harry Potter is only a decade, basically. But now it's been 20 plus years since that Harry Potter movie, and I'm like, oh, my time is a fickle bitch.
Just waiting for the reboot now.
It's nuts. But he's done a bunch of things over the years. I'm just getting his directing credits.
The big one for recent times to show where he's at is Pixels, the Adam Sandler movie.
Oh, he did Percy Jackson. I mean, I always looked at that as a Harry Potter, like, this only exists because Harry Potter's successful. So it's funny they got Chris Columbus to direct it.
Yeah, they probably specifically chose him because of that.
Oh, he did Bicentennial Man and Mrs. Doubtfire. That's his other big 90s movies. Interesting.
Oh, yeah. Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, both the first 2 Home Alones and then Mrs. Doubtfire made him a big name for a while there.
Adventures in Babysitting's his first movie, though, which I actually do. I didn't see that as a kid. I saw that much later, but I did have fun with it when I saw it. So he's got a few decent movies in his
I mean, he's
repertoire.
definitely transitioned more nowadays to producing. So
yeah, that's fair. So yeah, I think at this point it's probably a good time to talk about. So Kevin does, obviously, he gets scared and then he's looking at his photo and he's like, you know, I actually do want my parents back. I want my family back. And we've not even talked about all the chaos that he's caused in Buzzy's room. He knocked down all the shelves when he was trying to get the money and stuff. There's a great bit just to sort of sell how young he is as well, where he finds his brother's Playboy and he looks at it and he's like, none of them have clothes on. Yeesh. Like,
I love one of the few trivias I actually read for this was that the producers went through and taped together all the pages that actually had nudity on them. So
oh, really?
it was a real Playboy, but he was unable to view any naked women.
Come on, give him the payday, give him the boobs. He deserves it.
I feel like he snuck in when everyone else was out to lunch, and he's like tearing open the page a little bit, being like, "Hey."
Yeah, that's fair. But the thing I wanted to say here is with Kevin's arc is that I think one of the things that gives the movie a lot of heart is obviously the idea that he realizes no, he does want a family, and that's what makes the movie feel so Christmassy. Is that it's about him realizing the magic of having his family and the love of that is, and of course he in turn also inspires the old man who was scared of to rekindle with his family because he's got this estranged relationship with his son, and that's why he's at church later is because this is the only way he can see his granddaughter sing in the choir because he's not welcome with his son's family.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's basically just a future Kevin story. Like, if he continues down the same sort of path of arguing with his family and saying these things of, I wish you didn't exist, like, this is the kind of thing he was going to end up as.
It's a warning story, yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful the way it's, like, honestly, this movie is, in my opinion, broken into two entirely separate segments. It's the day in the life of Kevin living alone without his family, and then there's the Wet Bandits part. And they can essentially be completely divorced from each other.
But here's where they come together. This is my favorite thing about this arc.
Well, hold on, because I know what you're getting to. But the idea of this church scene, I think, is the emotional climax of the movie.
Sure,
I think that it is, and also kind of like what that entire Kevin living alone story was building to as well.
Here's the thing, is that before this church scene, he already knows the Wet Bandits are coming, right? There's a whole scene where they've deduced he's alone, and even says the title like he's home alone, and they're like, "Oh, that's coming. Kids are scared of the dark." So are you, Marv?
They give him an entirely separate shot where Joe Pesci turns to the camera and says, "I think he's home alone." And I'm like, yep, just mark that one off the checklist. Say the title.
Kevin hears all this. He knows they're coming, right? And that's when he goes to Santa and he wishes for his family back, and he ends up in the church with the old man, and he has this heart-to-heart and realizes that he wants his family. And he's already asked Santa he wants his family. He doesn't want presents. He wants his family. What I love is that when he leaves that church and he's motivated and that sort of like build-up music starts to kick in as he's running home, the decision to protect, because he could just not go home. He could stay somewhere else, right, in the church, wherever, and just stay away from the danger. But he chooses to go back and protect the house, not for himself. He's protecting the house because this is his family's house. And that's why I think the two plots come together really well. These two sides of it is that the heart of this isn't that he's just doing this because he wants to be a little shit and like beat up the bad guys. He's doing this to protect the family house, the house that means something to all these people that he wishes were back. He's doing it to protect Buzzy's room. He's doing it to protect the stuff that his mum cares about and that his dad cares about. And what's so good about the arc of the movie is that right at the start of the film, the first scene he's in with his dad, he brings up that he made something out of his dad's fish hooks, and his dad's like, "My new fish hooks?" He's like, "I can't do it with the old ones. They've got smelly maggots and shit on them." And the idea is that in the opening scene, he disrespects what his family owns, right? He disrespects their property, and then even throughout the movie, he's like wrecking Buzzy's room, right, without giving a shit. And the idea is at the end, he's like, no, I'm going to protect everything that they care about, and that's part of the arc of the movie. So there's a good like heart under all this that makes it. It's not just about him having hijinks and making the bad guys fall and hurt themselves. That's part of it, obviously. That's the surface level stuff, but that's what gives it all heart. And so that gets us into the third act where he builds his fun house of traps. And
his jigsaw light.
He's going to grow up to be I think I remember people used to joke that he was going to grow up to be Dexter back when Dexter was a big thing, the TV show, hunting down serial killers. But you could say he grows up to be Jigsaw because it's all trap based. Why not? Yeah. Or he grows up to be like Rambo, or even Arnold in Predator, because he makes a bunch of traps in Predator. Maybe he's going to grow up to be like the...
I mean, or again, just John McClane.
Yeah. I could see it. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose we're at the point where we're going to talk about all the traps and all the hijinks that happen.
The big third act stuff. So we've one of the things that this movie I think does very well is that during that first sequence when he's going around the house and he's looking for his family, it kind of just gives you everything you need for this final scene right there. It shows all the different things that are hanging around the house. It shows you how they've already existed here. He didn't have to go out and like buy a blowtorch or whatever. He's making it work within this sequence.
They're seeding everything. Actually, before we talk about all the trailers, they cut to the mum's plot for a little bit and the family stuff.
Oh yeah.
So eventually,
this is like by far the like third or fourth plot. It's the least important. Out of them all.
I still like some bits of it though. Like obviously it adds that kind of like, okay, she's trying to get back to her son. It's part of the heart of the movie and all that. But they realize, okay, look, there's nothing more we can do in the airport. Everything's booked up. There's no flights for 2 more days, and I think part of the reason, because at the end of the movie, the mum like makes all these other plans, gets all these other flights, gets driven to Chicago. And the others all arrive like 2 minutes after she does, which in a way says, hey, you didn't really have to go through all that effort, but it's important for the movie that she did. Because the whole point is that she feels guilty about leaving her son and she thinks she's a terrible mom. And it's about proving to herself, and to an extent the audience who might be judging her and saying, you kind of are a shitty mom for this.
Yeah.
Is that, no, she's that determined. It doesn't matter that it didn't accomplish a bigger amount of time at the end. It's just about, this is how much she cares. She's going to claw and scrape her way back to Chicago no matter what it takes.
Yeah, and it's not about the end result. It's about the effort it took to get there.
Absolutely. And so they all go and stay at the brother's place in Paris, Peter's brother's place, which this guy's obviously filthy rich too, because his apartment has the Eiffel Tower out the window. You can see it in the background.
No, that's just every apartment in France has that.
Yeah, but we've already established that the McAllister family is quite wealthy, so it's not a stretch to think that his brother's also... I mean, he's working in France for a couple of years. He's probably doing well.
Yeah, probably.
So, because Peter's got a good point. He's like, hey, let's go back to the apartment, because at least the police can call us back there. They can't call us back at the airport, right? When we're just using payphones and shit. So she's going to wait and try and get like a seat might open up somewhere to get back. So they all go. That's where we get the scene with Buzz and the sister. They're at the uncle's house or apartment in France. But the mum stuff.
Right there. My favorite bit from Buzz is, I got 3 reasons as to why he's good. I can't remember the reasons, but the numbering system is A, 2, and D.
Yeah, Buzz ain't too bright.
Nope.
He ain't too bright. So, but one of my favorite little scenes, before she gets back to the US and she's like begging this couple who are getting on a flight to Dallas, I think it is, from Paris, and she's like, hey, please, like, I'll give you $500 because I've got that on me. I'll give you this pocket translator that I have. I'll give you my jewelry, everything but my wedding ring, I'll give you. And
no, she offers up the wedding ring too.
No, she says a ring, but I think it's the other ring because she's got 2 rings.
Is it a different ring?
Yeah. And this old woman has been very sympathetic, but she's also saying, what about those earrings? Those are nice. And she's like, yeah, the earrings. Yeah. But my favorite thing about this scene is that the husband just doesn't want to like wait 2 more days to go home. So she's like, no, it's fine. Sorry, we have to go on this plane. And she's like offering everything, and the wife lists everything she's offered, like giving them first class tickets for their flight back. Which, by the way, these days you can't just transfer a ticket to someone else.
No, not at all.
You have to be assigned to your ticket. But anyway, especially international flights as well. But my favorite thing about this scene is that the old man goes, she has earrings at home, a whole box of them, dangly ones. Like, the way he says dangly ones just cracks me up every time. I love it.
This movie does a good job with its like one and done characters, even the cops and stuff like that. Yeah, the cops, like, they make an impression despite the fact they're only ever in that one scene. Yeah,
absolutely. They're very memorable. Just a little heightened, they're not meant to be realistic people, they're meant to be movie characters, and that way they work. So yeah, the traps. So we get a series of hijinks, falling down icy steps, both in the front and the back of the house, shooting the head with BB guns. I think one of the things that I like here is, and this is partly why Marv and Harry are so important to the movie, is the way they react to these things, whether it's Joe Pesci mouthing off, or I think Daniel Stern's really good with the body language. That moment where he's trying to get his balance outside the door, and he kind of does this thing where he almost, not the splits because it's not wide enough, but he sort of like puts his feet out as far as he can go into the wall to keep himself up. There's just like a rhythm to those moments where he is like making that scene work. The way he is acting is what's making it funny.
Oh yeah, his slapstick in this is, I mean, I think that Joe Pesci does a great job of keeping up. I think he does a good job with the stunts he's given, but it's obvious that Daniel Stern was given the much more physicality ones, the ones that required the bigger emotional.
Joe Pesci is the mouth. He's the one that's there to react verbally, and he gets all the best verbal reactions pretty much.
Yeah.
Whereas Daniel Stern, when he's like, you know, the nail in the stairs and the sticky tar or whatever it is, where it does that cartoony thing where he like lifts up his foot and he delays his reaction before he screams, which is very cartoony, but it's very entertaining to watch, and he makes it work.
Yeah. There was a moment where he's trying to break into the basement door and he's using his crowbar, and however it ended up working out, he ended up slipping and sliding on the ice, and his crowbar hangs on the door for just like an extra second before it falls down and lands on his head. That's a Looney Tunes bit. That's just straight out of Looney Tunes, and he performed it perfectly.
Absolutely. You got Joe Pesci getting branded by touching the hot door handle, which I love, because it sounds so dark when you say he got branded, but it's not like he got a brand out in brand. Like, he just happened to. It's on him for trying to steal stuff from the house. He's you know, he earned this.
I mean, yes, I agree. And in the context of the movie, nothing is really that bad. Everything is all kind of just, you know, played off as a cartoon sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there are so many things in this movie that if you took a step back from and looked at, it's like, no, they're dead. They died.
Oh, sure.
These people did not survive this.
Why am I love that M's still in his hand in the second movie. We'll get to that, but like, he's still got this M in his hand. And I don't know if this is an intentional reference, but it made me think of the movie M from 1931, which a murderer gets branded with an M in the back of his coat. And I'm like, it's just because they're named McAllister, but it made me think of it for a second.
Which, okay, you're just now bringing this up now. You're right. It's because they're named McAllister. Can you imagine being so bougie that you have doorknobs with your name branded on them?
I mean, it was the end of the 80s, the start of the 90s. It was a different time.
This guy must have worked for Reagan. Like, this guy must have been all up on that.
Good shit. Yeah, all good stuff. I love the, like, after the nail thing, Daniel Stern, Marv, like, decides to go back out and go in a different way. And I love that he goes out the door and you just hear him slip and fall again. You don't see it, you just hear it again. He's forgotten about the ice and he falls again. So he goes in the window after that. And likewise, Joe Pesci gets so angry about the branding that he kicks the door in and gets his head set on fire.
Yeah, that was the one that was a bit incredible for me, because everything else up to this point, it was just like, yeah, you know, there's a couple of icy traps and things that were already like preset. This is the first one that required like
violence.
Yeah, this is something where no, you could die here. This is the one where it's not just like, haha, you slipped and fell. It's a no, you're going to have 3rd-degree burns on your scalp for the rest of your life.
I mean, not all the traps are painful. Like all the chicken feathers or whatever it is that he gets doused in. Like, that's just to annoy him. That's just to piss him off. Which
makes it feel all the more disproportionate when simultaneously Daniel Stern has these glass ornaments shattered under his bare feet.
Well, to be fair, like, this is the one thing that feels a bit far-fetched to me, is that this is almost like Kevin knew that Audrey would do things. Because if he was still wearing his shoes, this wouldn't be a big deal. But
true.
Because he's done all this stuff in the basement and he's lost, and I love that shot actually of when it reveals, like, he's already started getting up the stairs when we cut back to him, so you see the first shoe, then the second shoe, then the sock, and then it's the second socks coming off on this step, and I'm like, I actually really love that it established he's already made a lot of this journey and that you get the sequence of events. I think that's quite good.
So going back to the deciding the order things, is it possible that Kevin only opened the window
after? Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. He is round about doing stuff in the house. That makes sense. But you know, he's got an attitude. He's grew a pair of balls because he's taunting them. You know, when he was so scared earlier on. You know, there's a real bravery element to this movie. So yeah, everyone remembers the paint buckets, though. I mean, that's the most iconic trap I think of the whole movie. Is them getting hit in the face with the paint buckets.
Yep. And then they make their way upstairs. There's a tripwire set up at that point, and then strangely enough, the one thing that is not accounted for in Kevin's plan of all this is he actually does get caught at this point. I think it's Marv does manage to actually get his hand on him, hold him still for a while, but because throughout this entire movie we've seen Buzz's pet tarantula has been moving about since he broke the cage, it just happens to be within arm's reach so that he's able to throw the tarantula onto Marv and escape.
Which is kind of nice because it's like, it's help from the family. This is Buzzy's pet that's showing up to help. So sure enough, we get that shot of Daniel Stern with this tarantula on his face, which, I mean, maybe he likes spiders, but I can't. If he doesn't, and that's most people, he probably did not enjoy filming that scene.
I mean, I have to imagine he was more neutral, where he wasn't totally against it. Though I did see a trivia bit where essentially he consulted the animal handlers there and wanted to make sure that the tarantula did not have eardrums, or like it would be okay with him screaming at the top of his lungs, like right next to it, because that scream was actually recorded like in that shot. It wasn't added in post. So
yeah, which is good, because I think if he faked the scream by not actually making sound, it would probably be noticeable with it being dubbed in.
I mean, if we're gonna real quick go back, the most iconic shot in this movie, I would say, is the aftershave applying, and he holds his cheeks and he goes, I feel like that was the most obvious dubbed in scream because they did it twice.
Yeah,
and I don't feel like people really remember that they even did it twice. I think they only remember it's done once in the movie, but then B is that it is so obviously dubbed in scream afterwards.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe that's just partly because maybe, I mean, he's not old enough for his voice to break, but maybe his voice, because he's a kid, maybe his voice was changing over time, so they wanted to get a good scream in the booth kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's always like a finale trap, at least in these first two movies, and the finale trap in this, of course, is that he zip lines across to his treehouse with this rope, and then they climb out after him, thinking they're outsmarting him. Like, oh, we're not going to like run over there. He wants us to do that. We're going to climb over. And then obviously Kevin just whips out the garden shears.
Yeah, which the zip lining over scene is the only time I definitively noticed the stunt double.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Because that is a 30-year-old man.
And you notice it as well on Harry with the fire in his head when he's going to eat the snow. And they cut around it really well to avoid it as much as possible. But you can, if you're paying attention, you can tell it's not Joe Pesci.
That's fair. But I'm just saying, like, Joe Pesci, at least it's the same build as Joe Pesci.
Sure.
Whereas Macaulay Culkin, it is a short 30-year-old man. Like, there is no way around that.
Yeah, I'm like, is it really that dangerous to? Because I feel like for the wide shot you can't see the ground, so why not just put a lot of crash pads so that it's safe for him to just do it, you know?
I mean, I don't know about back in the 90s, but I know nowadays it's all because of insurance reasons. Like, if the entire production has to stop because someone sprains their wrist even, or like dislocates a thumb, then it's losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a day.
I would be like, you know what? If admittedly as a kid, so maybe doesn't have that much appeal, but I'd be like, look, director, leave the camera rolling. I'm going to go do it without permission, okay? And then you've got the footage at that point, so
yeah, may as well.
Who cares?
I mean, that's more or less what Tom Cruise does in order to do his own stunts.
That's true.
He basically just tells him, like, look, I'll pay for the insurance, just let me do it.
It's better sometimes to ask for forgiveness than permission, and that's the trick to it sometimes. But yeah, so they go flying into a wall. Good fun. And that's just where, and this is the thing, like, Kevin'd already phoned the police from his house, but he phoned and he gave the name Murphy, which I have to assume is the person who lives at the house that he runs to, and that's because he's making sure the cops arrive where he's going, right?
Which, again, brilliant in the idea of this, the only reason for this to exist is so that the police don't find him living on his own. The police arrive at a different house, and they don't ever have to investigate the McAllister house.
Absolutely. And of course, they do finally trick him by getting ahead of him. They grab him, and for a minute, there's a little bit of menace, like, because they're very hijinky villains. You're not necessarily worried for Kevin, really, for most of the movie. This isn't Dial Code Santa Claus, which is a very similar movie from France.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Which me and Tim did on streams, and it's a great little movie, actually. There's some people have accused of Home Alone of ripping it off because it came out a year prior. I think it's too close for it actually to be a ripoff, and it's very different in a lot of ways, but there are obviously some broad similarities. But the bad guy in that, who's a psychopath dressed as Santa, like, no, he will murder the kid if he gets to him, right? The kid's fighting for his life. Here, maybe a little bit towards the end, you're like, okay, they're actually pissed at him now, they might hurt him, but it's only like a little moment, and it's just right before he gets saved by the shoveler who shows up. Not to be confused with William H. Macy's character from Mystery Men. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the shovel guy in this, Marley, who saves him. And it's like, hey, he made this friend and he looked out for him, and, you know, that's kind of sweet as well, you know?
And I guess that'll be one of my very few critiques here, is that this felt super Deus Ex Machina. This felt super, like, there's no reason that the guy should have even known anything was going on here. Like, why would he have shown up inside this random person's house.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess I could, like, there's a lot of commotion, because like, we've established that most of the streets are away in vacation, so the only noise or anything he might know, and he's noticed Kevin a few times throughout the movie, he's made friends with him at this point, maybe he saw him running across the street, and then he saw these two guys chasing after him, like, maybe one shot of him noticing that would just be enough to say, hey, that's why he knows, but maybe they don't want to spoil a surprise that he's going to come and save him. You know, they want it to be a Christmas miracle kind of thing.
For the surprise aspect, I think it's necessary, because they do the whole thing of he has very iconic boots that he's wearing this entire time. And so they do the thing of showing the boots stepping into the house first. So you can have that little buildup of like, oh, here he is. But yeah, I think that it does come at the sacrifice of, it seems like he just shows up out of nowhere and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I wouldn't even care so much if it were like an in the middle sort of thing, but it's the thing that wraps everything up.
Sure. I think for me, all the contrivances to make the basic plot work feel like a bigger thing to me than just him showing up at the right moment. I'm like, I can. That feels like a normal movie contrivance as opposed to the rest of them, which are all like, no, we have to contrive everything to make it so that this setup actually happens and works. You know? Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing contrivance-wise for this third act is that they specifically point out that all of the automatic lights turn on around 7 o'clock at night. Like, they go out of their way to say that. And then they say that the wet bandits are coming back to this house at 9 o'clock. So that means as we see Kevin running back to his home as all the automatic lights turns on, he makes his entire plan of how to take out these guys, has everything set up in just 2 hours. That's the part that seems crazy to me.
And I mean, at least they make it so that he runs out of time, because he makes some mac and cheese and he's going to have dinner first, and it's like, oh no, shit, it's 9 o'clock. Oh well.
Waste of mac and cheese.
I don't like mac and cheese, so I'm okay. Jettison it.
Let me just describe how rich and creamy it is, Pete. Let me just go through.
Jettison it, kill it with fire. Anyway.
That being said, I did love, he gave a little prayer there right before he was about to eat, and it was like, we give thanks for the people who made this truly nutritious microwave mac and cheese meal.
It definitely isn't. And then he also thanks the people for putting it on discount. He's like,
on discount,
thanks for being on sale. I'm like, hey, you have no idea how much more people are being thankful when things are on discount in 20, 30 years.
God.
Yeah. So anyway, police come and get the wet bandits, and Kevin, as far as the police are concerned, is never involved in anything, because they catch them in this house, and as we said earlier, because they've got this calling card, so, oh yeah, you've done all this to all these houses, so they take him away, and that's that. But then we get the heartfelt, conclusion. We have the mum on the way back. We briefly mentioned John Candy offering to give her a lift, but it's when she's yelling in the airport at the woman who works at the desk, or the guy that's working at the desk, and he's like, hey, you're getting to Chicago, well, we have to take a truck to Wisconsin. Or that's in Milwaukee. I'm not
Milwaukee,
wrong.
Wisconsin, you're good.
Yeah, and like, hey, so we're going through Chicago, do you want you can tag along if you want? And he's like, oh yeah, that's great, yeah, let's go. And he tells us a few stories on the way, which are quite dark and weird, but they get there, and Kevin wakes up, it's Christmas morning, and he's hoping his parents are just there. And this is the thing, after the whole night, he then decorated the living room with stockings, and the trees there. He's made it all nice, and he wakes up hoping she's back, and he's sad that she isn't. But then she comes in, and he hears her voice, and it's this quiet moment where he doesn't give away that he's happy to see her at first until just enough to like make her that guilt that she's feeling that he might hate me now because I abandoned him. But then he hugs her, it's all sweet, and then the Christmas miracle of the morning is that she says, oh, no one else can make it, it's just me. But then 2 seconds later the door opens, and it's everyone's there. Well, not everyone, it's only the direct family. The cousins and the aunt and uncle didn't bother coming.
Uncle Frank died on the way.
No, he stayed in Paris because he's getting free food from his brother.
True.
For the sounds of it. So that's the miracle part of it, and it's all very happy, and even Buzz is happy to see him, and they're surprised. Actually, the big thing I have though is that when he says he got groceries, and he says, yeah, I got milk and eggs and detergent, they're like, they never ask how he paid for it. I thought they were going to, like, why wouldn't they ask that? That's kind of a big question. Like, where did they get the money?
I mean, at that exact moment, I'm sure they're just more awestruck because, again, when they last left Kevin, he didn't know how to pack a bag. Yes. He had no idea how to do it. And at that point, they're like, not only did you live on your own, but like you balanced our checkbook. What?
You decorated the place. You seemingly cleaned the house well enough while we were gone.
Why is there blood in the basement, though?
Well, the dad does find the gold tooth. That is a thing. So yeah, that's just him getting his family back. This is his reward for doing the right thing and defending his house. You know, it all ties up. And then just as a final little bow on the whole thing, he looks out the window, and the man who saved him, who he's inspired to reach out to his family, is reunited with his son, and he's hugging his granddaughter. And it's the perfect Christmas ending. You know, it's literally a Christmas card with the snow falling. And that's something that I think we've maybe not even mentioned up to this point, is that this movie is so Christmassy because there's snow the whole time, there's Christmas lights everywhere. It feels as Christmas as all hell. Like you know.
That's the thing. Like the third act itself, there's nothing that inherently forces this to be at Christmas outside of everyone's going to be gone and therefore the wet bandits can strike. But you could have that be, you know, they go on summer vacation, they're out to the Poconos or whatever, and the entire family is gone. They could easily rob them then. It's only these like heartfelt moments, these moments where there's this feeling of family and stuff like that, that solidifies it in that sort of Christmas cheer.
I think it's that
aspect.
But it's also the fact that it's like kid wish fulfillment, and kids get what they want at Christmas. They get presents at Christmas, and I think that ties into why it's a Christmas movie too. It's like he gets to have the time of his life, or what he thinks is going to be the time of his life, until he realizes, no, I do want my family back. That's kind of like a monkey's paw Christmas present in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that ties into it as well. So it works from multiple angles. The movie ends with Buzz finding his room and not being pleased about it. So Kevin looks scared again.
There was a point like I forgot that last line was even a thing. And about like 3 minutes prior, Buzz is like kind of congratulating Kevin. He's like, I guess you could survive on your own. And they like share a look. And all I did was I just in my head said, I broke all your stuff, Buzz, and there's nothing you could do about it.
Oh dear. Yeah. I mean, the movie's very entertaining. And there's so many so many scenes are just very kind of memorable in my mind because they're quotable. Or even when they're in Paris and they're watching It's a Wonderful Life, but it's in French, so they're just kind of like sitting there being miserable because they can't do anything.
And it's like 50-50. The family is either miserable because it's, you know, everything's in French and they're just kind of bored. But then some of the family is actually worried about Kevin. Yeah. And they're like, oh, I hope he's okay over there. It feels weird doing Christmas without a family member here.
Yeah, and there's that scene actually just before, I think it's either just before or after he speaks to the Santa and goes to the church, but he walks past like a house where there's like a family all like getting together for Christmas, and you know he's like looking in and feeling sad. In my memory. There you go. Yeah. So it's all very sweet, and I think it works as a hijinks kid movie, but there's also a lot of nice messages in it. And watching it as an adult, it's honestly, like you said, the script is very tight and it sets a lot of things up. It pays them off. There's an arc for the character. The arc is kind of sweet because it's him defending the house because it's for his family. Like all of it kind of clicks together, and it's kind of a great little Christmas movie. And it might be my favorite Christmas movie, honestly, just because it's the one that I was the most attached to this as a kid. And when it comes to Christmas, nostalgia is kind of a big thing, you know?
Yeah, it's like 50% the name of the game there is just how much of this was around when you were a child.
Well, I think the movie works nostalgia regardless, but I think because Christmas itself, because you feel the most potent towards Christmas when you're a kid, when it's magical, when it's real, when you really feel it, that naturally a movie that not only was around at that time, which will work for us in our age group, but I think even just on its own, the idea that it's tapping into how a kid feels about this holiday will work for anyone anyway. So I think it works in multiple levels. So
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that this movie does keep on getting more and more installments well after the point where it shouldn't. Like, stop.
No, it should have stopped, yeah.
But it's because it's just able to bank on that original one, and probably two as well, as we'll get to in the next couple of days.
I mean, I won't spoil out too many thoughts. I'll just say I'm going to be sticking up for two quite a bit.
That's fine. That's fair. But it's purely off of the idea that that first one just nailed it so perfectly that they are able to keep coming back to the well. And people, I mean, they're negative on the more recent ones, but they aren't that negative when a new one comes out.
People are negative about 2 as well. Like, people say, "Oh, 2 is one of those sequels that just copied the first film again." And I'm going to spend a lot of the next review. Like, I don't know. There's valid critiques. There's one big negative in 2 that I'll talk about. But by and large, I think there's a lot of really smart, interesting things, and I'll make my case for it. But
all right,
after that point, yeah, it's just kind of these weird like sequels that it's one thing to not have Kevin, but to not have Harry and Marv is really the big thing beyond that point. So I'm I'm almost morbidly excited to get to those later sequels and see what all the bad guys are like.
See, it's one of those weird things though, where I can accept there always being like different villains of different people showing up, but it's because they do show back up in 2 again that it does kind of seem like a series staple.
Yeah.
Where it's then weird when they change it. But I'm actually more okay with the child being different each time, because you forget your child once, that's an accident.
Oh, yeah.
You do it twice, that's child endangerment.
Yes, that's a problem for sure.
Yeah.
Plus 2 has a lot of weird things that I'm sure are going to feel funny because of time's moved on.
Bro, I already know what you're saying. Don't. Just don't. I don't want to talk about it yet. Don't do it.
I mean, there's 2 big things I'm thinking of, and you're definitely thinking of one of them. But
yeah,
there's 2 that are coming to mind, but we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah.
We should rate Home Alone out of 10.
Oh boy. So, I mean, for me, it's good. It's great. I'm looking back at the ratings that I gave to the Santa Claus franchise, not because they're even close to being able to be compared, but I just want to see how much this movie's going to eclipse them. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this, and I don't think I quite have as strong of an attachment as you do. I didn't quite grow up with it as much. But it was around. It was something that I did see occasionally growing up, but like I said, it's been at least a decade since I've seen it. So with how tight the writing is, the score is just, it's now just Christmas. Like, it's no longer the Home Alone theme. It's just, here's a Christmas song. I gotta give this one 8.5. I think it's really, really good. The only thing that I will criticize it for is that the end of the Wet Bandits does feel a little bit Deus Ex Machina, but it's a small thing in comparison to the rest of the movie and how it all worked out.
Yeah, I'm also going to go 8.5. Like, I think in terms of how important it is to my childhood and like how much I care about it, it is probably like a 10 in that level. But in terms of like looking at it as a movie, I think it's an 8.5. I think it's funny. It makes use, like we said, of all the minor characters. Like, almost everyone's got at least one quotable line. Yeah. You remember all these scenes very easily. It's very well paced. It's structured properly. It works on the surface level with the hijinks and the fun of just, making traps so the 2 goofball villains get hurt. All that stuff works, but then it's got these other things that it's tightly constructed. There's setup and payoff. There's so many things. As convoluted as some of the setup is, it does manage it all and makes it all come across. So it's not realistic, but it establishes things in its own terms that it then sticks to for the most part.
It's that thing that we always come back to, is if you set up rules for how your world works, you need to stick by them. And this is class act with that. It sets up all these things at the beginning, and
the rules of the real world are nothing but a rough guideline, right? The most important is what you set up in your movie and say how it works. So yeah, 8.5. I think it's a really solid movie, and it's easy to rewatch this one. There was no after doing a couple of extra reels recently, recording schedule wise, this was just a treat to sit down and enjoy. So I think it makes the cut. I would say easily.
I agree. Do you want to make the argument for above that? Because obviously you're saying it's a 10 for you personally.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm saying it's an 8.5. I'm saying that on a nostalgia level, it's like a 10. Right.
But is that enough to get it into a cut above?
I don't know. I'm enough of a movie like nerd that I don't know if I necessarily let that cloud my judgment that much. Like, I'm still I still have a better perspective here. So I would still just say it makes the cut. I wouldn't say it's a cut above, but
I'll hard agree. But I see nothing wrong with that.
Like, it's my favorite Christmas movie in a sense, but at the same time it's not, because my favorite movie that's set at Christmas is not this.
Is it Die Hard?
Yes, which I do consider a Christmas movie. But
that's fair.
But this movie's more like pure Christmas. This is like Christmas injected into your veins. Whereas Die Hard is an action movie wrapped in Christmas paper. And that's fair. That's great. Yeah. So, yeah. But I grew up watching Home Alone and Die Hard. So the fact that they are the little and big brother of each other in a lot of ways is not a surprise to me.
The fact you grew up with that really makes me want to see what happens to people that try to break into your apartment. Because I feel like the two of those combined just immediately sets you up for, all right, here we go.
That reminds me, I need to buy some big knives just in case.
Yep.
So there you go. That's Home Alone. Obviously, next time, later this week, in fact, assuming the first one's earlier in the week, I assume later this week.
I believe it is. Yep, this one's going out on a Wednesday. So
okay. So good. Right. Later this week, then you'll get Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and from after that, it's all fun and games because we get into the non-remembered ones. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, let us know what you think of Home Alone in the comments and all that stuff. And of course, you can support us most of all by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and hitting the join button and pick a tier, get some bonuses, help keep the lights on. We have 2 monthly bonus shows specifically from us two. We have the Criterion Cut, which is a monthly show where we do movies from the Criterion Collection, so it's the best of the best. And then we have a monthly show at the $5 and up tier called Extra Reels, where we do the worst of the worst. Sometimes they're so bad they're amazing, but sometimes they're just misery.
Wait for your Christmas gift this year, kiddies. Jesus.
What is the Christmas episode of Extra Reels?
It was a David Dakota film.
It was a talking cat.
It was a talking cat.
Yes. So if you want access to that, you can go be a patron. You get bonuses for other stuff as well, away from Collector's Cut and whatnot. But that is the show. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And, there's so many quotes to choose from this one. What's my favorite? There's Kevin, you such a disease. There's, are you thirsty for more? All these things. But, I mean, I guess I'll just wrap up with the Home Alone. Bye, guys.